Just excited to learn about factoring tonight, but my husband insists that I include a joke in this video, so stay tuned to the end of the video to hear my hilarious knock knock joke. So we've already practiced multiplying two binomials and we've set it up in a box and come up with our answers. But the opposite process to multiplying is called factoring. And I'm going to go ahead and multiply out these two binomials so we can see how we get back to where we started from this process called factoring. So I've got x plus 3 and I've got an x plus 4. And I'm going to multiply x squared, 4x, 3x, and 12. And I've got, when combining my like terms, 7x plus 12. Okay, so here is the polynomial that results when I multiply these two binomials. Notice, and here's the note, that the product of the last two terms, which were 3 and 4, were also able to be added, 3 plus 4, to give me the coefficient of the middle term. And this is not by accident. Okay, so we're going to see how we can use that information to actually factor when we're given a polynomial. So we can attempt to guess and check. There are many ways of doing this, but I'm just going to go through kind of a method of guessing and checking. I'm going to put my parentheses because I know this is going to be a product of two binomials. I know that the first term of the trinomial is going to be x squared. So obviously each of the first terms in the binomials has to be an x. And since the constant term is 24, I need to think of all of the factors that give me 24. So I'm going to set up a little T-chart, 24, and just like we did when we were coming up with the area and perimeter in that one textbook problem, I know that I've got 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. And that's going to be all the factors that I can get to multiply together to give me 24. Well, since the middle term has a coefficient of 10, I know that my factors have to add to give me 10. So here are the factors that are going to add to give me 10. So now I'm just going to put those values into the parentheses. I've got x plus 4 and x plus 6. And then, of course, I'm going to go back and double check by multiplying. So when I multiply these two out, I get x squared plus 10x plus 24. And it did work. Okay, so I'm going to try to make this a little more systematic for you. I've got something called the box and T method. So I'm going to actually make a box today instead of just the lines I had before so I can reference where I'm putting everything. And then I'm going to have a little T chart over here. Remember that I need to multiply my two factors to give me an 8, but they need to add to give me a 9. So what are my factors of 8 that I can multiply together? 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Those are my only factors. And the only thing that will add to give me a 9 is right here, 1 and 8. So I know that my factors for when factoring this polynomial are going to be 1 and 8. So up here in the left-hand box, upper left-hand box, I'm going to put my first term, the x squared, and in the lower right-hand box, I'm going to put my 8. Then I have the two factors that are going to add together to give me 9x. So I need 8x and I need 1x, or just x. So it doesn't actually matter which box I put these in, it'll all work out in the end. I just need to put the 8x in one box and the x in the other box. Now to see how I get those factors, I'm going to take out the greatest common factor from each square. So going from here, if I'm going across here, I've got a greatest common factor of x. Across this line, I've got a greatest common factor of 1. This direction I've got a greatest common factor of x, and this direction I've got a greatest common factor of 8. So I can see here that my factors are going to be x plus 1 and x plus 8. And I could go back and multiply and check, and it will give me this quadratic x squared plus 9x plus 8. So let's try a few more together. I'm going to set up my box. I'm going to put my first term in this upper left-hand corner, my last term, the constant, down here in my right-hand corner. I know that I need products to get me 10, so I've got 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and since I need to get a 7, 2 plus 5 will give me 7. So I've got a 2x and a 5x in either box you choose. So I can now factor out my greatest common factor. Going this direction, I've got an x. Going this direction, I've got a 5. This direction, I've got an x. And this direction, I have a 2. So I can see that my factors of x are x plus 2 and x plus 5. And these two will multiply together to give me x squared plus 7x plus 10. So I'm going to let you try a couple of these on your own and make sure that you understand how to do these. Pause your video and check back in a minute for your answers. Okay, so here we found that the factors of this quadratic were x plus 2 and x plus 7. And down here I've got x plus 3 and x plus 4. So now we're going to get a little more complicated because I've got a negative sign here. So before we had two positives, so no matter what, it was going to add together to give me this middle term, the coefficient of the middle term, and multiply together to give me this term, but in that case both of my terms were positive. So notice when my last term is positive but my middle term is negative, that means that I'm going to have two negative factors, because when I multiply two negative numbers, they're going to give me a positive number. So let's work through this problem. I've got my box set up with my x squared and my 20. I'm going to find my t, 20, 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. And I needed to get 12, so here's my 2 and 10 that'll give me 12, except that to get a positive 20 and a negative 12, I'm going to have negative numbers for both of these. Negative 2x and negative 10x. Okay, hopefully that made sense. Multiplying will give me positive 20, adding will give me a negative 12. Again, I'm going to factor these back out. I've got an x here and a 2 and a negative 2 here. I've got a negative sign here. If it's next to the negative, I've got to pull out a negative. Negative 2 here. I've got an x that's common to both, and I've got a negative sign right here, so I'm going to have to pull out a negative 10. So if it's next to it, pull out the negative. Okay, so let's go back and see what I get. That factors to x minus 2 and x minus 10. And in fact, I would get a x squared minus 12x plus 20, because these two negatives would give me a positive 20. So let's try another one together, and then you'll be on your own. So I'm going to set up my box with my x squared up here, my 18 down here, my t, okay, and notice it's got to be an 11, so I've got my 2 and 9. This is going to be 2x and 9x, but they're both going to have to be negative to add together to give me a negative 11. Factoring out the greatest common factor, I've got an x here. I've got a negative sign, so this has to be negative. And greatest common factor here. Negative is right next to this, so I got to pull out a negative. So my factors are x minus 9 and x minus 2. Go back and make sure that those multiply out to give you the same quadratic. Pause your video, try these two on your own. Okay, hopefully you were able to find these factors. All right, so now we've got one more situation where the last term is negative, but the middle term is positive in this case. So that means that my two factors have to have, in fact, different signs, because in order to multiply two numbers together and get a negative number, one of them has to be negative, one of them is going to have to be positive, but they need to add still to get this middle coefficient. Okay, I've got an x squared and a negative 24. Looking for my factors to get negative 24. I'll deal with the negative in a second, but I've got 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. All right, so now I need to look at how I can use these to get a positive 2. Well, there's a difference between the 4 and the 6 of 2. So I need to do something with my 6 and my 4 that'll give me a positive 2. Well, if I have a negative 4 and a positive 6, that will give me a positive 2. If I add negative 4 and positive 6, that gives me a positive 2. So I know I need a positive 6 and a negative 4. Okay? Because by adding these two together, I get a positive 2x. And by multiplying those two numbers, 6 and negative 4, I get a negative 24. So I'm still going to factor this out. And here I've got a 6. This number is not negative, so that's still positive. But here I've got a negative, so I'm factoring out a negative 4. So my factors are x plus 6 and x minus 4. So I'm going to be multiplying to get that negative 24, but adding a positive 6 and a negative 4 to get a positive 2. Let's try one more together. X squared and negative 15. 15. I have very few factors, but I see that the difference between these two will give me a 2. I want to have a positive 2x, so I need this number to be positive and this number to be negative. 5x, negative 3x, factor those out, x, 5, x, and negative 3, so that I get x minus 3 times x plus 5. Of course, it doesn't matter which order I put these factors in because I still have the commutative property of multiplication. I'm going to ask you to see if you can find this one on your own, but pause your video and see what you can do with these two and check back and see if you've got the answers correct. Okay, so this one went exactly the same as before. We had a positive 8 and a negative 3, but notice this time, in order to get a negative 7x, my bigger number had to be the negative. My smaller number was the positive, so that I got an x minus 10 and an x plus 3. And here's my daughter to help me with that joke I promised you. Knock, knock. Who's there? Polly. Polly who? Polynomial. All right, so bring these 4 trinomials factored for class on Monday. Have a great weekend.